このスタッフやってる清水川なんですが、森本さんとか皆さんが翻訳されている ASCII からというエキスパート Python プログラミングの伝統者である、フランスで、Python リスターとして活躍中で、今年の PSF Python ソフトウェアファンデーションのアワードを取られています、タレックさんです。ここから英語になりますので、頑張って皆さん聞いて学んでいただければと思います。じゃあよろしくお願いします。
Hi, gozaimasu. That's all I know, sorry, so I have to practice Japanese for a while. So, how many people here speak French? No? Okay, so I guess I'll speak in English. Too bad. So, all right. So I have two things I want to talk about today during this keynote. The first one is packaging, because I've been involved in packaging for a while. Like for the 2 or 3 past year, I've been working in trying to make packaging suck less in Python. So I'll explain during the keynote what problem we had with packaging and what we did to try to solve it. And then on the second part, the small part, I'll be talking about Python 3, where we're going, what you can do today with Python 3, and if there are other alternatives. How many people here use Python 3 in projects? Okay. Hey. All right, packaging. So the problem with packaging today in the Python community is that when you want to try to package your stuff, it's insane. It's really hard. So how many people here enjoy doing packaging? Please raise your hand. You do? All right. Usually it's it's really painful to package your stuff, because you have always some problems to do the right packaging for all the platforms and stuff. And so most of the time when people are sending us email to try to understand what they need to do in order to do the proper packaging, they are always mad at us because they think Python packaging is really bad. So it is. So basically when I wrote down this slide, I tried to list all the problem we have, the 5 most important problem we have in packaging. The first problem we have in packaging today in Python is about defining dependency, the right way to define a dependency, how your project depend on another project or on some kind of library. The second problem we have is about defining what's up with the setup.py file. So who don't know what's a setup.py file? You all use a setup.py file in your project? All right. The third problem we have is about what's installed in your system, because we have some installer, but sometimes we don't know how to remove stuff from your system. And the fourth problem we have is about versions. We'll see what's up with version schemas in projects. And last but not least, I'll be talking about how we can define data files in your project. All right, so dependencies. Sorry. These tutils is a very old library in the Sonnet library. It was started in Python 1.9, I think. It was like more than 10 years ago. So they've added something that was inspired from Perl, and they tried to put in Python something that was helpful to package Python project the same way people used to do in Perl. And that didn't work so well because there are some specific stuff in Python that doesn't work the same way than in Perl. So first example, I'm pretty sure most of you don't use it or don't know about it, but there is a feature in distutils where you can add an option in your setup.py file to say, hey, my project depends on the LDAP module. It doesn't say which project, it just say, hey, if you have an LDAP module, I depend on it. But the problem with this approach is that you can have an LDAP module on a lot of projects out there. So this is not really useful. And so when you write in a setup.py file these 2 lines, and when you run the command python setup.py sdist, distutils will create a small packet, a small file called package info that contains a line, requires LDAP, and then it will take this file and install it in the site packages directory of the target Python where you install the project. But this option is not useful at all because, as I said, in the Python ecosystem we don't distribute modules, we distribute projects. So this was never used. So I've looked in PyPI how many projects out of the thousands of projects you can find at PyPI who used this option. I probably found maybe like 5 or 10 people using it, and it was a bug because it's not useful at all. And then in 2004, I think, Philip Eby started to write a project called Setup Tools, which defines the right thing. So basically you can define with Setup Tools project level dependencies. In other words, if I have a project that depends on the LXML project, I can use the option called install requires, and I can say, okay, my project needs this other project you may or may not find at PyPI, the Python package index on python.org. And this was really more useful than the previous stuff we had with distutils. But the problem is Setup Tools didn't change the way Python was writing the metadata. Instead, it created its own set of metadata on the top of distutils. And so when you run Python setup.py as dist, Setup Tools will run the one from distutils, and then it will run its own one, and will create extra metadata files. So if you look in your site package and if you use Setup Tools, you will find files called requires.txt, which are basically the list of the dependency you've defined with the install requires option. And then Setup Tools provide a module called package resource that you can use to browse what's installed on your computer. So if I go back to distutils, in distutils we didn't have such APIs. We were not able to tell people, hey, here's the list of the stuff you've installed on your system. It was just installed, and if you wanted to know what was installed, you had to open your directory and go look for it. Setup Tools made it less worse by providing some API to be able to browse what's installed, but it was not enough. It was not enough because when you write a project, let's say for Linux Debian, you might want to tell people that they need to install, for example, the libxslt dev library or whatever, and there is no way in Python today to provide this information, except in your README file. You can write down in your README file, hey, if you're under Debian, you might want to install this stuff because I have a C extension that needs it to compile. And the major problem with this kind of dependency is that depending on the system where you are, they might change a little bit. For example, the libxslt dev library is not named the same way under Red Hat or CentOS. It's called libxslt devel. So those tiny differences make it really hard for someone that releases a Python project to give useful information for people to install their stuff. So how many of you had this kind of problem? Do you release stuff under Linux or Windows? Linux, anyone? And I don't know, do you release on Windows at the same time? No? Yeah? So you know what I'm talking about. It's very hard to provide a setup.py file that works well in all systems. Alright, so how did we try to solve this? So we sat down with people from various community, like people from Red Hat, from people from Ubuntu, and we had a few sprints at various events at PyCon US and in other places, and we tried to find the best way for us to fix this problem. So the first thing we did is that we removed the module level dependency defined in distutils, because it's not used at all and it's not useful. So this is gone. And we've taken back from setup tools this project level dependency you can find in setup tools, and we stick it in Python 3.3. So starting at Python 3.3, you will be able to define dependencies in your project on other projects. And the third thing we did is to provide hints for system level dependency. So basically a way to say, hey, you might want to install libxslt or any kind of library my project might need to be compiled. So all this work was done in PEP 345. So PEP is basically a paper called Python Enhancement Proposal. So when you want to make some proposals to improve Python, you write to PEP and you send it to Python Dev, and they tell you it's not good enough. So you write it again, and it's not good enough. So you write it again, and it took us a year to finish those PEPs. And the PEP, which number is 345, defines everything I've explained, the new metadata set for your project. So basically, when you want to define dependencies on other projects, there is a field called requires dist, where you can say, hey, I depend on LXML greater than 1.0, or here, I depend on ZOP interface greater than 1.0. And we've also added a new feature that will let you define OS-specific fields. So for example, if you depend on PyWin32, and you want to say, hey, I have this cool project, it can work under Linux or Windows, but if you are under Windows, I want you to have the PyWin32 library installed. So you can express this by adding this, what we call the environment marker here, that says, hey, if sys.platform is Win32, please have this, library installed in your system. And this is written in pseudo-Python, and you can use this in Python 3.3 to define dependencies that are specific to some platform. And last but not least, if you want to give some hints for people that want to repackage your stuff, for example, if you are developing some kind of XSLT feature and you want a libxslt dev install, you can add a requires external field to give a hint for people that repackage your project. And the thing is, this is just a hint because the guy that is working under Red Hat or CentOS will probably change it to another name to match the name of the library on his own system. Alright, so that was about dependencies. The second problem is about setup.py. So setup.py is this weird place where you can do a lot of stuff. If you want to register or upload a file at the Python package index, the cheese shop, you can use setup.py and you type down Python setup.py register, and that will send all your information about your project on PyPI. Or you can do upload. It will create a source distribution and push it at PyPI. You can build your project, of course. You can work locally on your project using setup.py with setup tools. You do Python setup.py develop, for example. You can get some information about your project. So for example, I can grab a project at PyPI and run Python setup.py -- author, and it will print in the command line the name of the author. You can, of course, install the project manually by typing Python setup.py install, or the installer out there, easy install and pip will grab your project and run the Python setup.py install command in it to install it. So the problem with the setup.py tool is this. This is how people, no, frankly, this is crazy. I don't know if you've seen some project out there. There are some setup.py files that are 2,000 lines, and they are doing some crazy stuff. They are checking your system. They are trying to see if you have, I don't know, Python install, and then they compile some headers, and then they are scanning all your headers to try to find some other headers. And so, for example, if I type Python setup.py -- name, which is simply to get the name of the project, sometimes it may take 3 minutes to output the name of the project, because the guy that wrote the setup.py file didn't make the assumption setup.py could be used for something else than installing the project, right? And so I don't want to point fingers, but there are really known projects out there that have this problem. They have overkill setup.py file because they make the assumption that a setup.py file is only used to install a project, which is not true, and that's a big problem. So we solved this by simply saying that in Python 3.3 there is no more setup.py. We removed it. It's now ignored. So basically everything happens in a file called setup.cfg that you might already have used in the past. It's an ini file that contains just options. And so basically we want to say to people, okay, please do not write those crazy setup.py file anymore. Use static information about your project. Because when you want to tell people what's the name of your project, you don't need to write Python code for this, right? You just write the name. When you want to provide the version, you don't need Python for this. And you don't need Python to explain what your project contains in matter of files or packages or stuff like this. So people in the future will use this text file to provide all the information we need to install stuff. And this is a nice way to stay backward compatible, because it means that in your project today you can keep a setup.py file to be compatible with the older version of Python with setup tools and pip installers, and you can start to be compatible with the brand new stuff just by adding a few sections in your setup.cfg file. And that gives, like I said before, a clean separation with your build process, because you don't have to tell people to run Python anymore to get the metadata. And a really nice feature about this is that in the future we will allow people to upload their CFG file in PyPI. So installer will be able to read all the information about your project without having to download the tarball, the archive of the release of your project, and without having to run any code. So they can read the file on the internet and know what's the name of the project and what are the dependencies about your project. And that's going to make a few installers out there really fast, because they are going to be able to read all the dependency you need without downloading anything. So here's an example. Here's the JITbuster project. If you go today at PyPI, you will find this project. It's a new project. It uses the new packaging standard, and we just write down all the dependency here, metadata information here. And see, I don't need any Python to do this. I'm writing down everything about the project in a static file people can work with. I'm making happy all the op guys, the downstream maintainer in all this Linux distribution, because they won't have to deal with crazy setup.py anymore. They will just have to open a text file and get their information in a simple ini-like file. And here I'm defining all the stuff that are contained in my project. Again, no Python needed here. And we've added a few features so you don't have to write down the whole list. So for example, here packages is the list of the package you have in the project. And you can use globe style patterns with stars and stuff like this. And we also provided in Python 3.3 way for you to have all those files generated automatically. So I have a demo here, and I cannot read Japanese, so so I guess it's this one. Okay. So the second letter is chi. That's all I know. Okay. Oh, okay, here we go. I get it. All right. Okay. So here I have a project foo. It's a really nice Python project. It has many things. It has a README text file and 2 Python files in foo packages. It's a very complex project. There is a long text explaining what foo does. And here I'm going to use the PySetup command line tool. Let me go back a little bit. So PySetup is provided by Python 3.3, and we will provide it in a few months. I'm saying that since a year. We will provide it in a few months, and it's not there yet. But I have good hopes that we will have it for Python 2 in maybe at the end of the summer. So the PySetup command is something you can use anywhere and everywhere because we don't have setup.py file anymore. So when you are working in a project, you can call this command to do some stuff. So here, PySetup comes with a lot of options, and we are going to use the create option. So hold on, we don't see anything here. All right, so here I'm filling down a few options like the project name, the version number, a summary, the author name, the email address. Oh, this guy is typing very slowly. Project page, home page. And here I'm asking it, it asks me if it wants me, it to find all the files for me. I say yes. And then I have a setup.py file written. And you can use this in your project to generate this setup.cfg file to have to make your project compatible with the new PySetup script. Yeah, okay. Okay, I want to get out of here. Oh, that's not Firefox. That's why. Or maybe you can close it and reopen it. I broke it. Ah, okay.
Okay.
Ah, thanks. Thank you. All right, so that's about setup.py. So as a conclusion, setup.py is gone. We are going to have a lot of people angry about to us because they are doing a lot of stuff in the setup.py. But the good news is that if you have some code you need to still run for your build step or your compiling step or whatever, you can use hooks. We provided ways for people to hook some code from within your setup.cfg. For example, if people are going to run a PySetup build to build your project, you may hook a function that will be called at this moment. But we are still in a world where setup.py is gone and where you don't have to write Python code anymore to provide the basic information about your project. All right, so what's installed? So the first time I show Python to a friend, and I was really excited because I was starting to contribute to Python and to distutils and stuff. And I say, hey, you gotta check this project. It's very cool, so you should install it. So he ran Python setup.py install. He was really happy. And then he told me, Tarek, how do you remove the project now? You can't. There is no way to remove your project in Python. It was like, what? Yeah, you cannot remove anything. If you install something, it's installed. You cannot remove it. You have to go in the shell to find back all the files, to hope to be able to find back all the files that were installed, and then you have to remove them manually. And he was like, that's a shame. And I was like, yeah, I know, but you know, I've asked myself to the people in charge why we didn't have an installer, and they told me it was very complicated to do this. And I was looking at the other languages that had an installer, and I told them, how did you do that? I was told it was very complicated. And they were like, no, you just list the file and then you remove them. Oh, okay. So we worked on this, and what turned out to be complicated was not the feature ways to remove a project. It was the legacy code, a way to do it in a smart way for people that had already some stuff installed in their environment, and to have a system that was friendly with a previous version of Python. That was the hard stuff. So what do we have today? We have 3 installation formats in Python. We have these tutorials, like from Python to something to Python, the latest version. When you do Python setup.py install, it will do nothing about it. It will just push the project on your target installation and create the package info file, which contains the metadata, the name, version, and stuff like this. But nothing will be done for what's installed on your system, which is a shame, because DistUtils has an option called record that writes down in a text file the files installed. In other words, we had ways to do it, but it was never done. And since DistUtils didn't have a maintainer for years, no one cared really about it, and that's how things went. So, and then we have another format, which is setup tools easy install script. When you do easy install whatever, it doesn't do anything in this respect either. So it's installed stuff, and if you ask the maintainer about it, hey, can you create a easy remove, or I don't know, can you provide us something to remove project? He's like, no, sorry, it's too complicated. Okay. And now we have pip, which is a new installer. Do you use pip? Yeah? All right. So you should use pip. Use pip. It's so pip creates install record text file which contains all the stuff that were installed, and you can remove stuff from your computer. And so we're going to do this in Python. So we've written another pep which defines a database for installed projects. So basically it's very simple. It says, whenever I install a project on Python, the project must create a directory called the project name .dist-info, and in this directory I must find 4 files. The first file is record. It's the list of the recorded, the list of the installed files. The second one is the metadata, so the old package info. We just renamed it to metadata because it made more sense. The third one is installer. It just writes down which installer was used to install your project. We want this because we want people to be able to write other installers, and when you have an installer and when someone wants to remove a project that was installed by another installer, it's always a good idea to ask first to the user, hey, I'm Pip. You told me to remove this project, but it was installed by another installer. Are you sure? And the last file is requested. So this file is just a marker to say, hey, this project was not a dependency of another project. The user requested it as a top project on his installation. In other words, when I install LXML, LXML will be a requested project. But when I install Django, and Django install Django-foo, Django- blah blah blah, etc., all the small packages that get installed beside Django are not requested project. They are dependency. And that's useful if you want to provide a feature in your installer that is able to remove dependencies or orphan dependencies. Again, we didn't invent anything here. That's how it works in most systems. All right, so a few features. So basically, in Python 3.3 and in the standalone release we are going to do this summer, that you will be able to use in Python 2 today. It's going to be called DistUtils 2. You will be able to iterate on all installed projects. You will be able to list what's installed and know which files are installed and used by which project, and you will be able as well to uninstall projects. All right, demo time. Maybe the second one is better, huh? Yeah. I get it. Okay. Oh, you have to download it, so maybe it's downloading. No, that's the old one. Maybe you can click and download it. Okay, I know how we're going to do it. Yeah. Okay, all right, so here's another demo of PySetup. Again, PySetup is this script where you do everything and anything for packaging in Python in the future. And whenever we release the standard version, you will be able to use the same feature today, and it's backward compatible with older version of all installer. So it will work with packages you've installed with easy install or pip. All right, so PySetup. So we have a few actions, and here I'm gonna call the list action. So if I do PySetup list here, it's gonna list everything that's installed on my system. So I have SQL Alchemy at version 0.7, and it's gonna tell me where are the where is the location of the project. I have distribute, rope. If you don't know rope, it's a really good project. You can use it to rename all your, if you want to rename and import, you use rope, and it's going to look at all your files in your project and rename it automatically for you. 322, etc. So here I'm in a project, my project. I have my setup.cfg file with a few information. I depend on distribute and SQL Alchemy here, and it's a file. It's a project with a single Python file, this.py. I'm going to install it. So I don't use setup.py anymore. I do sudo pysetup3 install, and it's going to install stuff for me. And see here, it installs all the file I've talked about. And now, if I open record, you see all the files that were installed here with MD5 hashes. And if I do PySetup list, I will find back my project here, which is installed. And now I can do stuff about my project. I can call the graph action, and it's going to display the project and all its dependency on the command line. So I know that my project depends on distribute and SQL Alchemy, on which version. I can ask with the metadata action, I can ask PySetup to list me all the metadata about this project, and I have a -f option where I can ask for a single metadata. So here it displays the distribute and SQL Alchemy dependency. I can also remove the project. Wow. Okay. Oh, just a small bug. All right, it asked me if it should remove it. Oh, it's removed. So now when I try to do stuff about my project, it will claim that it's not installed. So again, in the future, PySetup is going to do everything and anything. I've shown you how to play with a local project, but you will be able to do the same thing with a project at PyPI. So today you do, for example, pip install LXML or whatever. Tomorrow you will be able to do PySetup install LXML. And it's going to grab it and do exactly the same thing. In fact, some people from the pip project are involved in this and are working with us to make it ready for Python 3.3. And okay. Oh, so okay. Oh, that's presenter notes. Yeah. All right. So as a summary, we'll provide ways for people to introspect what's installed. There will be a single standard database for installed projects, and we'll provide tools for people to use it with older installer, and it will be backward compatible. All right, what about version scheme? So this is a list of version I found on PyPy. The version field. So someone released a project at the version unreleased unofficial dev. There is also one called pre-alpha, and this is a crazy one here. That's a real one. You can find it at PyPI. I mean, I don't want. I hope the person that did this is not in the room today. Because he's going to be mad at me. I don't want to make fun about this, but I just want to say, okay, if I need to work with version, and if people are pushing at PyPI version like this, how do I work with them? So, for example, how do I sort versions to know which one comes after which one? Because when the guy is going to release the next one, how he's going to call it? Like, I don't know, 1.foo blah blah blah. I don't know. It's so that's a big problem. Today you can push anything and everything at PyPI in terms of version. There is a working proof of concept, which I mean it's nice. I know it's a working proof of concept, but it doesn't help me to deal with the versions. Like dev, okay, but which version? Tip, okay, tip. Why not? These utils will install this and will be able to tell you that trunk dev R5 comes before unreleased unofficial dev, because it's just doing alphanumerical sorting, and that's horrible. That's insane. And setup tools is insane as well. It tries a little bit harder, but whenever it doesn't find a way to sort the version, it just uses alphanumerical sorting, and that's not going to work. So we've written another PEP. Sorry, that's a lot of PEP and numbers. So this PEP is about a standard version in Python. We are basically saying to people, now please stop all of this. It's crazy. If you want to push a project at PyPI, you should use a simple major, minor, micro if you want, and you can add another level if you want. And this should be auto-incremented, and that's it. We also provide in this scheme ways for you to do alphas, betas, release candidate, and dev version. So here I have an example. For example, you release 1.1, and after you want to work on 1.2, you may release an alpha 1 version for 1.2, and this will be sorted before 1.2 and after 1.1. And this scheme works for 85% of the project we found at PyPI. In other words, 85% of the people are already doing this in their project. and some other people are doing this. So we want those people, we want to tell them, please don't do this anymore. And what is going to happen in the future, when you are going to run PySetup upload on one of these projects, PyPy will answer, ha ha ha, no, I won't accept your package. You have to change your number. So it will be impossible in the future to push packages with this number. Okay. Last problem, how to define data files. So disutils and data files. So back in 2000, when disutils was created, added in the Python distribution, people were not really aware of what to do with data files. So basically disutils said, okay, I have Python module, I have scripts, and I have data files. And there were no distinction between the different kind of data you can have in a project. For example, if you write a game, you might have a video file or images, pictures, and stuff like this. There is no way in Python to tell what different kind of files you have in your project. And this is a problem because when Red Hat or Ubuntu guy wants to repackage your project for his platform, he needs to know which files are data files you might read only. He wants to know which files are just media. He wants to know which files are, I don't know, a SQLite database and stuff like this, because unlike Windows, under Linux, files should be installed in specific places in the system. And so we don't have this in Python. And today, this is how people are handling data files, because they want to be able to reach back their files once the project is installed in Python. So what they do, they use the dunder file variable, which gives you the path of the module where you are running this. And they are just putting their files, their data files, within their project like if they were Python files. And that's the easier way to do. And that makes it work. That works under Windows, Mac, or Linux, because you'll know that the file will be alongside your module, Python module, and that's how people are doing it today. And we don't have a better solution in disutils. But we fixed it for Python 3.3. So basically, we've added a level of indirection. In Python, we have now a file called sysconfig CFG, which contains all the path on your system. Saying, for example, hey, if you want to, I don't know, add documentation, here is where you should install it. If you want to have pictures, here is where you should install it. And all those paths have variables. For example, the app name, the version, and stuff like this. So basically, it's able to place on your system the files at the right spots. And you, in your project, you can define in setup.py file, setup.cfg, a resource variable where you say, hey, I have a picture, please put it in the data path for the application. The variable app data is the path on the system for all the data files for my project. And there is another variable called icon, and that's where the icon of the project should go. And we've defined a lot of variables like this, and we've allowed people to extend it, and that makes it really easy to define where the files should land on the system. So the first step to do is to define in your setup.cfg.file. The second step happens when the installer wants to install your project. It looks at sysconfig CFG in Python, reads back the value for your platform. So here data_dir is USR share, and app data is data_dir this name. So if I combine those two pieces with the name of the project, I can find where the project, the pic.gpj must be installed. And this level of indirection allows people to handle data files in the right places on the system. And last but not least, when you are in your project, you can use an API called getFile, and you can say, please get me the file for the project called my project, which is called app icon or pic JPEG. And getFile will find back your project, look at it, find the line that defines that pic JPEG should be in app data, read back the sysconfig file here to find back where it's installed, and find the file. Alright, so I hope I didn't lose you here. Was this clear? Yeah? Okay. Alright, so that's it for packaging. So the roadmap for the project. So as I said, we want to provide a backport for Python 2. This is going to happen by the end of the summer. There is in hgpython.org a distutils2 project. And if you want to help, you're welcome. So basically we take back from Python 3.3 the packaging directory, and we make it work under Python 2. And whenever Python 3.3 is out, the version 1.0 for packaging will be out, and we'll release at the same time the standalone release for Python. But we want to provide a beta version of the standalone release as soon as possible, so people can start to work with it and tell us how it works and give us some feedback, so we can have something as good as possible for the 1.0 version. And as I said before, people will be able to add packaging support without losing setup tools and distribute and distutils support. So you will keep your setup.py file in your project, and you will be able to add a few sections in your setup.cfg, and your project will be installable by any installer out there. All right, but but you can't do nothing today because we didn't release it. So here is so I've written down a few tips you can use today in your project to prepare everything for the future. So the first tip is, okay, so forgot something. Yeah. Use a sane version, please. If you have a project with the crazy versions, don't say it to anyone, but change it and use something like 1.1, 1.2, stuff like this. That would be useful, because the day you are going to move to the new packaging system, it won't work anymore. We will just tell you no. So this is important, and it's easy to do it today. So, and maybe your version system is already compatible with PEP 386. You can check it. It's a very simple scheme. Tip number 2. Please try to make your setup.py as dumb as possible. There is a good test for this. Try to run Python setup.py-name. It should return only the name of the project without anything in the standard output, without anything else. It should not run any code or do crazy stuff. The third tip is do not make any assumption about what people are using to install your project. I've seen some stuff out there that are crazy. For example, some people are using the easy setup script. So they put in their setup.py stuff, they try to import setup tools, and if it fails, they run the easy setup script that grabs setup tools, install it on the system, and then it install the project. So basically it means that you sneaked in setup tools in the computer of the guy. It's like a virus. I mean, if your project needs setup tools, you should, and if it's not there, you should ask first to the user, hey, my project needs setup tools. Can you install it? Don't install it for him on his back. Don't do this. It's rude. And most of the time, your project can be installed on plain disutils. So you can have in your setup.py file a little test to see if setup tools is installed. And if it's not installed, just use plain disutils. And maybe the user will have to do some manual steps because disutils provide other extra features. But don't make any assumption. Don't force the user to use setup tools if the user wants to use plain disutils. Number 4, don't release unstable release at PyPy, please. This is a very important tip. Okay, so PyPy, the installer, so you remember the crazy version? How people can know which one is the stable, which one is not the stable? It's impossible because there are so many schemes out there. So an installer won't make any difference between a stable or unstable release at PyPy. When you do install something, it will grab the newest one. So if you release a something that doesn't work, you will make people mad, and some stuff will break out there. And I've heard some people saying, but this is fine. I mean, if people don't know how to make a difference with a stable or unstable release, it's their problem. They should not work with our package. No, you cannot make this assumption. People will have problems if you release unstable release at PyPy. You can use other channel because installers are smart enough. You can like say, hey, I have this new beta version for my project. It's available at this URL, so if you want to install, you can say pip install and the full URL. But don't push it at PyPI. Last tip, be careful about your data file. So as I told you before, data files are very fuzzy right now in Python. So if you do have data files, try to have a single place on your project where you read the files, for example, and document it. So people from downstream that are repackaging your project are able to know exactly what are they working with. All right, so that's all for packaging. I hope I didn't bother you with all the technical details, but I thought it was really important for you to get a deep overview of what we were doing and what things are going to look like in the future. So the second part is about Python 3, because I've asked Jan and Jehota what people wanted to talk about today at the keynote beside packaging, and there were one question. The question was what version I'm using, what Python version I'm using today. So I was like, hey, yeah, I'm using Python 2, and why I'm not using Python 3? So if I look back at the Python 3 project, it started in 2006 with a branch of Python, and in 2008, in November, we had the first version released, the Python 3.0 version, and we had one in 2009, and the last one was in February 2011. And I must say that the 3.0 cannot be used, it's broken, it's horribly slow. We had a lot of problem with it. So the first version people started to use for real was the Python 3.1 release. Again, how many people here are using Python 3 in production? Just one person? Oh. Congratulations. All right, so Python 3, when it started, people thought it was going to take around 5 years to move from Python 2 to Python 3. And eventually we'll get there because Python 2.7 is the last version. And once Python 2.7 goes in maintenance mode with just security fix, people won't have the choice. They will have to use Python 3. So one day you will use Python 3. But the thing is, there is no killer feature in Python 3. If you look at the feature, I mean, Python 2 is a complete language. It's feature completed. There is nothing today I want to do in Python 2 I cannot do, and I have to switch to Python 3. They were just design fixes, a few nice features, but nothing really important. If I want to write something today in Python, Python 2 is perfectly fine. So that's basically why people are not really pushing hard on moving to Python 3, and there is a very slow uptake. This is a diagram that shows how many packages in PyPI that used the right option to say, hey, I'm compatible with Python 3. How many packages we have at PyPI? So we just have 500, and I think PyPI is maybe around 10,000 projects or something like this. Maybe half of them are not active, but you see my point. It's a drop right now in the number of projects we have at python.org. But there are a few important projects that are already compatible with Python 3. So there is distribute, which is a setup tools fork, and this is a very important one because a lot of people are using setup tools in their setup.py file. And if they didn't have distribute, there were no way for them to be compatible with Python 3. So that was a low-level brick, really important for people to be able to start moving to Python 3. There is NumPy and SciPy, which is already compatible. That's really important for people in the scientific community because they do use Python 3 now. There is SQL Alchemy, which is compatible. It's used a lot out there. How many people use SQL Alchemy here? I do. Okay. How many people use Django? Okay. All right. Well, so in Django you have something else, but if you do like web programming with Pyramid or Pylons and stuff like this, SQL Alchemy is used a lot. And we have two frameworks that work under Python 3 right now, to my knowledge. There is CherryPy and Bottle. So those are micro framework you can use with Python 3. And if you go to this page, written by Brett Cannon, p3k support.appspot.com, it's an interesting place because you will have a list of all compatible packages on the top 50 of downloads in PyPI. So you know exactly which packages are compatible with Python 3 and which ones are not. And it's an interesting project because Brett didn't work only on looking at the option and the classifier in the project. He manually changed the flag when he knew the project was compatible. So for example, setup tools is not compatible, but it appears as a compatible package because there is the distribute fork that makes it compatible under Python 3. And so he changed a few entries manually like this. So if you want to know if all your dependencies are ready under Python 3, you can go to this website. But we still have a lot of missing libraries and frameworks for Python 3. For example, PyCrypto is used a lot out there. When you want to do, I don't know, some SSL or encryption, you need PyCrypto. A lot of projects are using PyCrypto. And it's not under Python 3 yet. WebHop, which is a small wrapper around a WSGI request and a WSGI response, is used by a lot of projects out there. And I've been told by the maintainer it will be very soon compatible with Python 3. In fact, I think the next release is going to be compatible with Python 3. And WebHop is one of these packages that might make a lot of projects go to Python 3 because a lot of projects depend on it. There is the natural language toolkit, which is not compatible with Python 3. It's used a lot out there for people that were working on data mining and stuff like this. There's the Twisted project, which is this big fat project. It's a 10 years old project with a lot of code. And so basically, to move it to Python 3, it's not hard, but it's just a huge amount of work. And last minute, okay. I'm going to speed up now. And Glyph told me that people are just not interested enough to go to do this work. Django is not compatible. Pyramid will be compatible in around 8 months. That's what Chris told me. And the other stuff I wanted to talk about is PyPy. So PyPy is, do you know what PyPy is? So PyPy is this nice project that is faster than CPython in most cases now. And it's compatible with Python 2.7. You can run Django on it. You have C types and stuff like this. It has great features like sandboxing. It has a stateless mode, so you can have a gridlet-like features. But it doesn't have any support for stuff like G-event. It doesn't know how to compile all the C extension, but we're getting there. And the problem is, now we have PyPy. And PyPy is only Python 2. And people are looking at PyPy and they're like, oh wow, I'm going to use PyPy because it's very fast. It's very cool for my project. So instead of trying to move to Python 3, they are moving to PyPy now. So we have Python 3 and we have PyPy. And I'm pretty sure the Python 3 uptake will slow down because of PyPy, because it's only Python 2. And until PyPy is compatible with the Python 3 syntax, I'm pretty sure Python 3 will go down, because PyPy is just taking so much importance today. I mean, a lot of people are really excited about PyPy. And Duma?
Thank you very much.
I'm not sure we have time for questions, but if you want to find me during the day, I'm around here. And this is my Twitter and my email, so do not hesitate to contact me if you have any questions or stuff like this.
Thank you very much.
ありがとう。
もう一度大きな拍手をお願いします。ちょっと質問タイムとかできなかったのですが、気さくな方なので、ぜひすれ違ったらいろいろと声をかけて、いろんな質問をしていただけたらなと思います。途中から入場されている方が多くいらっしゃると思います。このカードをもらっていると思いますが、